we are headed down to Orlando to BC Racing because we had a very large item shipped, and you usually have to ship those large items. It's an engine, obviously. Somewhere commercial, somewhere with a forklift, because it has to be unloaded with a forklift. So anyway, I just ship it to BC, I run down there, I pick it up. So that's where we're headed. We are picking up a new engine for the Miata. This is pretty wild. This is pretty wild. It's actually happening. I can't wait to show you guys and tell you the plan, and we're going to start diving into this thing once we get it home. So it's pretty exciting. This causes big plans for both the Miata and the RX-7. Things are going to get rowdy. The Miata is getting a major upgrade. It's getting a big boy motor. It's going to have some big boy power. All right, we made it. Here's the motor. Why do they paint it green?
I think they probably just mark their motors like good or bad by just spray painting them, but that kind of sucks.
It looks pretty clean though. It doesn't look like all corrosion.
Yeah, I opened it up to make sure.
Yeah, no, it looks solid.
Dings or anything. Headers look fine and all that. It's just pressing out.
Glow packs even look at how clean all this stuff is.
Yeah, I like how they did this too. Like they plugged this stuff up.
So yeah, I'll tell you guys more about this motor here when we get it back. We got to get it home and start stripping all the crap we're not going to use off. But I'm hyped, dude. This is going to be sick, Marco.
What if I drop it?
Don't drop it. We got a strawberry lemonade. We got a fresh one. If you run into it, it does not matter. I said if you run into it, it doesn't matter. So just go go until you hit it. The tailgate's destroyed anyway. Oh my gosh, do you see how much it squatted? That's like the one problem with this truck is just how soft the rear suspension is. Send it. Oh, there you go. There you go.
Professional.
Beautiful, dude. Beautiful.
Tailgate too.
All right, let's drive this thing in. Alrighty, made it back home with the engine. It was super windy. I thought this thing was gonna topple over. I was a little concerned because these straps are not in the best shape, and I didn't bring an extra strap with me to strap over the top. Anyway, I was mildly concerned, but made it back without issue. So I'm gonna pull it out, put it on the stand, start stripping it down, and I'll explain to you guys like what this is and what we got to do to it and why, etc. If you're ever putting a V8 on a stand, you want to get the center up as close to the crank as possible, so when you spin the engine upside down, it doesn't have a lot of weight one direction or the other. Alrighty, she's on the stand. So now we're gonna get the essentials off, mainly really the intake manifold, the wiring harness, the coil packs. All right, first thing to remove, wiring harness. Cool tap sensor, got it. It's always so scary. Oh, you're gonna split your hand open. Oh. Always crazy how different all these motors look with the different intakes and accessory drives and whatever, and then you strip them down and they're all the same underneath. Got all the main components off. Got all the ports taped up. I mean, obviously I could have pressure washed this with the intake manifold on, but then I'm not gonna get in here and get all this crap. So I wanted to try to strip it down as bare as possible so I can get in all the cracks and crevices and try to make this thing look halfway decent. I am a little worried about this paint though. I'm assuming they paint it so like they know it's theirs, but I mean, like, who does that? I don't want a green motor. But anyway, I'm afraid it'll come off with the pressure washer. But anyway, let's go soak this thing with some oven cleaner and get at it. If you're ever cleaning an engine, oven cleaner is the ticket. So if you get it at the dollar store, it's $1 a can and works better than normal engine degreaser. I mean, I still had some left. That was basically a full can coated this whole engine. So neat little trick. From what I understand, it's not good on paint, like it'll damage paint. So maybe avoid that, but for engine degreasing, works like a charm. Alrighty, so while we let this thing drip dry, I know some of you might be wondering, Taylor, well, what are you doing with the Miata? Why are you putting a different motor in it? Did it blow up? Did it break? Some of you already know this plan, but no. So, the motor that's currently in the Miata is an L33, which is a 5.3 aluminum block truck motor. It's the high output version. So it's got flat top pistons, which give it 10.1 to 1 compression instead of 9.5 to 1. And it has 799 heads, which are one of the better cathedral port heads you can get. So it's got decent heads, and again, higher compression compared to a normal one. I have not dynoed this particular motor. I had everything the same cam, same intake, same injectors, rails, literally same everything on another 5.3, which I happened to rod knock my first drift event, which is why I put a dry sump on this car. But moral of the story is we dynoed that car on E85 and made 339 wheel at I think 30 or 31 degrees of timing. Now this motor has slightly better heads and slightly higher compression, but otherwise everything's the same. But we have turned the tune down to like 26, 27 degrees of timing. So I believe, based on logic and what I know different things gain, I believe it probably makes right around the same. At most, it makes 350 wheel. And a lot of people think I'm sandbagging with that, but I mean, for a 5.3 with cast iron G8 manifolds and a sub 600 lift cam, like, that's honestly pretty good. Like, I'm pretty surprised it even makes that much, but if somehow people see how well this car can keep up with some of the faster, higher horsepower cars. And just assume that it makes more power than that, but it definitely does not make any more than 350 wheel. So for a long time for me, that was enough. I never felt like I needed more power in this car. The problem is I was basing my kind of power to grip level off of the OSW skid pad. So I was like, okay, these 225 Federals that I have, and that I run that are relatively affordable. They're the best cost tire I can get that's sticky and grippy and the biggest for the price. With these tires, aired down at OSW skid pad, like, I still have plenty of power. I definitely do not have too much grip for my power level. However, what I didn't take into account was the fact that OSW skid pad is very slick. It is a very low grip surface. It's probably one of the lowest grip surfaces I've ever driven on. So it kind of dawned on me when we were competing at Clutch Kickers, which is also an asphalt surface, but significantly more grip there. I noticed that my car was bogging down and struggling a little bit, especially when I saw the foot pedal cam. I had a foot pedal cam and I could see when I would get on throttle and how long it would take the car to really wind up to the higher RPM range. Basically be if I let off the throttle in the beginning of the turn, got back on at full throttle, it would take to the end of the turn for it to really be ripping again. Where that gets really difficult is when I'm tandeming and I'm competing against somebody that handbrakes into every turn. So what'll happen is they'll come into the turn, they'll handbrake, slow down for a second. I have to then slow down for a second. They'll have the power to get back on throttle and get the wheels right back up to the wheel speed they want to be at, right back up to rev limiter. I get back on the throttle and it takes me a second. It's kind of like by the time I would catch them is when they'd be hitting the e-brake again. I'd slow down again and then... Ooh, so it just sounds like I'm like lugging it and idling around the track. Basically, my goal is put a little more power in the car and be able to get the wheel speed up quicker, be able to get it right back up to wheel speed, make the car more responsive. So when people are e-braking and stuff, I can just jump right back on them. So that leads us to this engine. This is a 6.2 liter, basically the biggest factory GM engine you can get aside from the LS7, which I consider that an anomaly. It only came in like one car and they're super expensive, and this is basically as big as it gets. It's a 6.2 liter aluminum block. It is not an LS3 though. It is an L92, so it's the truck version. Same, rectangle port heads, everything, all the good stuff, but significantly cheaper. And there is a reason for that. There are some things we have to change, which we'll get into when we get it inside and start tearing into it. I can show you those things. But yeah, basically the end goal for this with cam and everything is to make 450 to 500 wheel, which should be perfect. So not only will we be making this car quite the weapon and really making it as pretty much as competitive as the chassis can handle. I don't really think we could use any more power than that. What are we doing with this motor? Well, this is kind of how this all dawned on me. I was thinking about how to make more power with that motor, and I was like, wait a second here. We have the FC, and this thing's got an iron block 5.3 in it, bone stock. No upgraded cam, no valve springs, no nothing. This thing probably makes like 250 wheel, which would be fine. However, the motor is very low on oil pressure. It is 100% on its way out. So I realized I can take the 5.3 out of the Miata, put it in here, pick up 80 to 100 wheel, which is like exactly what this car needs. I noticed at the last event, I can run big tires on this car because I can run 18s, and it definitely felt like it could use another 80 to 100 wheel. But any more than that, and it's just going to start blowing through tires and being expensive to drive. So I think that's going to be kind of the perfect power level for it. And we also drop 100 pounds of weight off the nose, which will make it handle better, will make it more responsive, more balanced, and lighter overall. It should bring us down to right around 2,600 pounds, which is really, really light for a car that we can stick a 265/18 on. Should still be a great seat time car, really good on tires, fun to drive, even more fun to drive, and all of that. So anyway, that's kind of how this plan came to be. I realized I could kind of kill two birds with one stone, upgrade the FC, make it kind of exactly what I really want it to be, and turn the Miata into a monster, making like 500 wheel, which should be freaking amazing. I've had this car at this power level for a year and a half now, and I got to admit, I'm really excited to have a little more power in her. So yeah, all that being said, it's kind of the plans and why we're doing this. Let's get this thing in and start tearing into it. So the first thing we need to do, get this crank pulley off. All right, so these are factory torque, 240 foot-pounds. Let's see if the mid-torque Milwaukee will do it. It's done it before, but what a freaking monster. This is my favorite, well, second favorite impact. The stubby 3/8 is my favorite. This is second favorite. Everyone always asks 2861-20. I think there might be a new model number now for this, but it's the mid torque. I take this to the track with me for lug nuts and stuff. This thing is awesome because size wise, it's really pretty small. Let me show you the big one so you know the size difference. So this is what a lot of people get because it's got all the powers. But this does almost everything. Rarely, very rarely do I have to break this guy out. Granted, when I have to break it out, nothing else is gonna do the trick. But for the most part, I mean, that's a 240 foot-pound bolt. This guy got it out, and it is so much lighter and easier to deal with. So I would suggest this one, but obviously personal preference. Trusty dusty LS crank pulley puller. I learned this lesson the hard way and broke my crank pulley puller tool, but you do not want to use an impact on these. You can feel it when it breaks, like breaks that seal. And it goes pretty easy. So the nice thing about doing a Gen 4 engine like this is, you know, this engine's only a little over 10 years old, whereas some of the Gen 3 truck motors you're gonna get are, you know, they might be freaking 21 years old by now. There we go. That went surprisingly easy. All right, now I need to flip her over. I'm gonna pull the valve covers first. That way the oil drains into there. I've got a little bit of varnishing buildup. Also, I forgot to tell you guys, this is a 108,000 mile motor. When I was looking for these, it was like I could save 500 bucks and get like a 200,000 mile motor, but then most of those people had a core charge, so it ended up being about the same price. You can find them for as cheap as like 2,200 for a 200,000+ mile one, but you're gonna refresh it, you know, I mean, that's a good way to go. But I'm a firm believer in leaving the stock bottom end as GM put it together. They're a lot better engine builders than I am, and I would say a lot of people are. I mean, yeah, it's just one of those things. Like, it's assembled at a factory with all the factory torque specs and everything in its place exactly how it's supposed to go together. I trust that a lot, especially for an NA application. To me, it just makes sense. Just leave the thing alone. Get a nice one, leave it alone. Tangent over. Let's flip this thing upside down. This pan is the best thing I have ever got in my life. I think I got it at Summit, on summit.com or whatever. But yeah, it's meant to sit on an engine stand. Catches all the crap. Because if you ever rebuilt an engine or messed with an engine on a stand, you know that you always get stuff everywhere. What the hell is this? It's just a piece of metal that bolts to the... That doesn't make any sense. Someone has definitely done a rear main seal. You can see the excessive RTV. That is not GM. You're only supposed to RTV the corner where this plate meets up to the block. I always get a little weary when I see stuff like that, but I like to think it was just something simple like a rear main seal that was done. I hope that's all it was. RTV'd. Good bit of gunk in the pan. Nothing that looks metal-y, metallic-y. Take the windage tray off. It's kind of wild. That O-ring feels pretty worn out. Everything looks pretty good in here though. Everything's clean. All right, let's flip this thing back over and get to the point I was gonna make. All right, we're gonna go ahead and pull the rocker arms off. So something a lot of first-time LS tear aparters do not know is that you can grab this whole tray, give it a little tilt back, get the bolts to slide back in, just pull it out as one big unit. There's like this stuff all throughout it. This is like goop deposit buildups. A lot more so on that side, which that side has the PCV, so that would kind of make sense. But it was like in the threads too. It's kind of crazy. Okay, now reason one of why this being very similar to an LS3 is a lot cheaper than an LS3. I paid $2,700 shipped for this engine. An LS3 similar condition would be $5-6 grand minimum. So let's get this off. I don't know if this is actually gonna, oh yeah, okay, cool. It does come off. All right, so what you're looking at here is variable valve timing. So these motors have variable valve timing. Now, I think given some time, I think people will start utilizing this. They'll use it with aftermarket cams. They'll be able to make more power everywhere. VVT is a great thing, but right now no one is really messing with it on these engines. There's not a lot of knowledge on it. And it's kind of like the JZs. Back in the day, people would take the non-VVTi 1J head, put it on a 2JZ bottom end. That way they could eliminate the variable valve timing altogether because no one really had a bunch of knowledge on tuning it. No one really knew what to do with it. And nowadays, the VVT is the bee's knees. Everyone loves it. Everyone runs it, and they pick up tons of power in the mid-range by utilizing it. And all the ECUs are capable of doing it, and yada yada. I think this will become that. Maybe not, because these motors make so much mid-range anyway. But I think people will start utilizing this and making more power everywhere. But for right now, the easiest thing to do is to delete it. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna buy a 3-bolt cam gear that has this same pattern on it. So these engines, this engine being a Gen 4, the cam sensor is on the front here. On a Gen 3 motor, the cam sensor is in the back and reads off like the wheel on the cam. On these, it's at the front reading off the cam gear. So basically, we just buy a 3-bolt cam gear that has this same pattern on it because this is what the cam sensor is picking up, these different pieces and then the lack thereof, right? So we also have to change our front timing cover. This one is made for that VVT solenoid. We're not gonna have the VVT solenoid, so we just get an LS2 one, which has the cam sensor in it, but doesn't have all this other crap. So basically, to eliminate this, we need a cam gear, and a timing cover. We're gonna change the chain and stuff, but that's all we really need. And to me, the cam itself is a moot point because if you're doing an LS swap, I feel like you're probably gonna do a cam anyway. So really the only added cost doing this over say an LS3 or something like that is the gear and the timing cover. Now there is one more major thing that we have to resolve. Normally, thing number 2 with one of these newer Gen 4 engines, this is kind of a cross year because it's an 07, but it is technically a Gen 4. Anyway, is what's called displacement on demand. So normally this valley cover would have this maze of stuff going on, and then essentially all these passages would be going to turn off certain lifters to turn off certain cylinders. So push rod engine, you've got your cam, you've got your lifter, you can kind of see the tips of them right there. So those push up, they push that push rod that rocks the rocker arm, opens the valve, etc. So what that DOD does is it turns off certain lifters, so those cylinders are just shut and closed, and you run on 6 or 4 cylinders for fuel economy on the highway. We got lucky because we got ours out of an 07 Escalade, and all 07 Escalades were non-DOD, so it's not something we have to worry about. But if you bought one, one of these engines from a different vehicle, they came in a lot of stuff, you would have to deal with replacing the DOD. But it's not really a big deal. You buy one of these valley covers for like 40 bucks, and then you essentially really just replace your lifters and trays. The big kicker, the big thing that kind of keeps these motors out of reach and makes you second guess them. I was actually going to do this before I put the second 5.3 in the Miata, and this was the reason I didn't. Different cam sensor, as I showed you. Crank sensor's in the same spot, reads off the same thing. There's a reluctor wheel on the crank. Obviously it's internal, and that reads, when to fire the coil, when to spray fuel. It's the timing of your motor. It's how the ECU knows where the engine is in rotation, right? So the Gen 3 engines had a 24 tooth reluctor wheel. These have a 58 tooth. Now you might think, Why does that matter? Well, it matters because if you want to, keep things budget and run a stock ECU, if you run a stock 58X ECU, the physical hardware on the ECU does not have the drivers to run an idle air control motor or anything for drive-by cable, so you're stuck with drive-by-wire. Now, that wouldn't normally be a problem on a standalone or something because the drive-by-wire stuff's actually really cool, but on a stock ECU, from what I understand, it is very difficult to tune and becomes a nuisance, and it's just kind of a mess. Like, from what I know, not ideal situation to have a stock ECU in a swapped car with an electric throttle body, right? So what a lot of guys do is they get a converter box to go from the 58X reluctor wheel signal to the 24 so they can use a Gen 3 motor's ECU. Now, the problem with that is, from what I know from people who've had them, those converter boxes fail all the time and they're expensive. So that's kind of a Band-Aid situation. You drop the crank out, so you're disassembling your whole engine. You press the reluctor wheel off and you have a machine shop press you a 24X back on. So the last option, if you don't want to convert, you don't want to do any of that messy stuff, is a standalone. The problem is the standalones for these engines used to be like $2,000, $2,500. So what do? Kind of weeds you away. The stock ECU stuff's cheap, can't really use it on this without conversion. However, the big game changer and single-handedly pushed me into the direction of doing a 6.2 instead of like an LS1 or something like that. Holley Terminator X. So if you've seen my videos, I have one of these in my car, the LS Miata, that is. This is an amazing system. So it is a full standalone plug and play harness, comes with a wideband, has self-learning. So you set your target air fuels, it reads the air fuel and makes corrections while you're driving. So self-tuning. Comes with a 3.5-inch touchscreen that you can tune on. It has the auto setup wizard. Crazy capabilities out of this system. And this is the more baller one so that we can use drive-by-wire if we want, which I think I'm going to try out drive-by-wire in this situation because there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with it if you're using a standalone ECU that has that capability. So I want to mess around with it. I think it'll be fun. And it's $1,300. The Terminator X is right at $1,000. Now you compare that to the cost of the stock ECU, which is what I originally had in the LS Miata, and assuming you get an ECU with your engine, which you probably won't buying it from like a wrecking yard. Let's say you do though, $500 for a good conversion harness. You're gonna spend $500-600 for HP tuners, and you're gonna spend $200-300 on a wideband. So you're already at the price of the X Max. You're more expensive than the regular Terminator X. So that's a huge thing alone. And what's cool about the fact that we're doing the X Max on that engine with drive-by-wire and whatever is when we pull this engine out for the RX-7, we're gonna be able to pull this whole shebang and drop it in as a turnkey engine. I mean, leave the injectors, the rails, the wiring harness, the ECU, all tuned, ready to go. Just take it out of this car, plop it in the RX-7. So that'll be a super, super easy project because it's literally just an engine swap. It's already freaking plug and play ready to go. We just got to yank that one out, toss this one in, we're ready to rip. This will be a little bit longer of a project. Still shouldn't take very long, but because I'm going to be making a bunch of changes to the LS Miata, fixing a bunch of long overdue needed repairs and upgrading some stuff along the way. So that's going to be a little bit longer of a project, but again, still should be pretty quick. My plan is get this motor as assembled as I can before we tear into the Miata. I've got to swap a couple things over, like my oil pan, because I have my dry sump pan and my dry sump pump and a couple little things like that, but basically get everything else done. So all we got to do is pull that engine out, plop this one in, move on our way. So that is the plan. The engine internal parts should be here the next day or so. So once they get here, we'll start diving into building this engine. So let me know what you guys think of the plans and everything. I am super stoked, man. 6.2 freaking 450 500 wheel in the Miata. It is gonna be nuts. It's gonna be insane. I can't wait. So anyway, I guess that's gonna be it for this video. I'll see you guys for the next one. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Goodbye.